Welcome to the Gay Liberation Network here on CAN TV. Tonight we're very pleased to have a pair of guests from Iraq Veterans Against the War. Joining me right now is David Van Dam, who is the leader of the Chicago chapter here of the IVAW. And David is going to tell us a little bit of the reasons why he is against the war in Afghanistan, frankly, all the wars that are going on, and a little bit about Iraq Veterans Against the War, which if you're a service member, whether in the service right now or a veteran of the Iraq War, or the Afghanistan War, I'm sure that you want to get in touch with people like David because they provide great support. But tell our listeners a little bit about who Iraq Veterans Against the War is. Why is the organization in existence?
Originally it started in 2005 after the first wave of troops came back from the first deployment from Iraq. Basically, there wasn't currently a veterans organization that represented how they felt about the anti-war movement, and so they teamed up with Veterans for Peace at one of their yearly conventions and founded Iraq Veterans Against the War to have people hear their voices.
And how did you personally get involved, David? What was the issues that led you to say, I need to do something very different?
That's kind of a long story. But I originally joined the military to pay for schooling and also get out of my parents' home.
Right.
Pretty much like majority of the people in the military. Obviously, patriotism does play a role, but it's mainly financial reasons, paying for school, to pay for their kids and whatnot.
Did you feel like that was the way with most of your fellow soldiers? In terms of their
yes.
In what year was it that you joined the military then?
I joined January of 2007.
Okay. And how did you feel about the Iraq and the Afghanistan wars when you joined the military?
I kind of was at the time, like most Americans, I think I was apathetic, and I was also 18 or just turned 18.
Right.
So I was more thinking like living from day to day, not really thinking about the current situation in the Middle East or no idea what the peace movement was or anti-war movement or GI resistance was. I was just thinking about when I saw those bills that I would have to pay when I applied for schools that I got accepted for.
Right.
I realized I had to pay for this. I wanted to go to school, and I joined. That's why I joined. And
how is it that your ideas about the wars began to change? To go from being I'm going to join to get some schooling and so forth to I'm going to come out as an anti-war person. That's quite a switch. What led to your change in opinions?
Well, my change of opinions basically started when I was stationed in my active duty station. I was very fortunate being in the Navy, from the Navy. My ship was basically in the shipyards, and so I was on land, seaside, for about 8 months. And basically, you're working like a typical factory job, Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., and then usually weekends off. And I joined also because I wanted to help. I wanted to do something, and I thought the military was a good option for that. And obviously, I didn't feel sweeping the floors every day was very humanitarian. So I looked to other institutions outside the base, and I didn't classify myself as a religious person. So I didn't want to preach some type of philosophy or religion upon people if I was the volunteer or something. And I stumbled upon an organization called Food Not Bombs, and this was in Norfolk, Virginia, where I was stationed at on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. So basically, I met people who were activists, people who worked in community gardens, and then also fortunately for myself, someone who knew a veteran who was in the peace movement, who was in Veterans for Peace.
Right.
And I explained my situation, and I was open-minded to it, to talk with them. And basically they told me the history of GI resistance and how people listen to their conscience versus listening to their government. So basically, after a course of 7 months of volunteering and speaking with this Veterans for Peace member, he recommended me books. I read them all. I read Howard Zinn to Chomsky to all this, and basically my philosophy changed to an anti-war stance. And
Oh, I think it's very interesting for our listeners to take note of how David's views did change. It was through conversations with people who were involved in the anti-war movement, whether you're talking Veterans for Peace or the Food Not Bombs folks, that this is a role that those of us who are not in the military can play an active role in terms of turning people against the war. And those of us who know the history of the Vietnam War know that when American soldiers turned against that war, it was a huge blow against the war aims of the then Nixon and before that Johnson administration. So I think it's your personal history, which I literally did not know until right now. I think it's something that all of us who were involved in the anti-war movement can learn from. But I'd like you to, before we bring Ty on here, tell us in broad strokes, what is Iraq Veterans Against the War about? What's the aims of the organization? What do you do?
Currently we're undergoing a campaign called Operation Recovery, operationrecovery.org. Originally it was basically a speaking forum where we went to panels and expressed our opinions. But currently we're undergoing a campaign that's targeting public officials and base commanders, telling them that there's a certain number of troops that are currently coming back from deployment that are being traumatized. It's about 20% of all active duty troops that are suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, TBI, traumatic brain injury, and also military sexual trauma, i.e. rape in the workplace or sexual assault. And these things are overlooked in the military. Usually they're not overlooked in any other workspace, so why would they be overlooked in a military setting? They're workers. They should have the right to their human rights.
They're decent medical care. I mean, this is, I think, something that those of us who are students of previous wars know, that there's always been a battle to recognize post-traumatic stress disorder. It was called shell shock in World War I, and it had various other names through the years, but the military has always dragged its feet so as to avoid paying out benefits to people who need it. And with this particular war, the traumatic brain injuries are really off the charts, and that's a price for the war that not only veterans will be paying for decades going forward, but frankly, in terms of the medical bills that we haven't seen in previous wars, because a lot of people who would have died on the battlefield, I mean, fortunately are living, but they're living with very, very severe injuries, and certainly the science on traumatic brain injury is shown just how awful it can be for former boxers and so forth.
And a lot of these wounds, I consider them wounds, but you don't really see them. PTSD, for example,
Well, and we're already seeing with veterans of the Iraq and earlier phases of the Afghanistan war, the large numbers of vets who are homeless, who...
One in four, I just checked, it's about 1 in 4. It used to be 1 in 3, it's about 1 in 4, but we're still fighting the Afghan war still, so...
Right. Well, and how do you feel about the president's pronouncements that the war is somehow ending? It seems like here we are, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of the invasion. It's America's longest war. How do you feel about all that?
I don't know. This war's been going on since I was 13. I remember when I was in Catholic middle school, and Irish algebra teacher told us that the United States has just been attacked, and we all laughed. We had no idea we couldn't comprehend this. And I'm 23 now, and this has been going on way too long. And I feel like the war can't be won on a battlefield. Terrorism is an idea; it's not a state. It's not a country. A recent terrorist, for example, was just assassinated by the military, and he wasn't in Yemen, and he wasn't even in Afghanistan. So this battlefield is it's global, and they were also educated in the United States or from the United States. So.
It's an American citizen, this gentleman. There's an excellent article up on Salon.com basically pointing out that the United States government had very little information to go on as to whether or not he truly was involved in terrorist activities, and yet the United States government has just acted as judge, jury, and executioner, which is an attack on civil liberties, which even the George W. Bush administration wasn't as brazen about. But this is now, there are dozens of people on this so-called terrorist watch list that the United States has decided that they can just go ahead and blow away. These are the American citizens that the Obama administration has admitted are on their so-called terrorism watch list, and they just killed this person. I understand that his father had filed suit against the United States to say, hey, you know, if you're going to charge my son with something, charge him with it and try and bring him to justice, but don't go killing him unilaterally.
And also the wars in Afghanistan, and also switching from Iraq and to Afghanistan, which has now larger troop numbers. The public opinion doesn't even justify this war in the Middle East, and also the fact that this tactic of counterinsurgency that the current U.S. military has, we're not even sure if it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, lowering our threat, lowering the threat of their idea of terrorism. And
the CIA has admitted that the war in Afghanistan is unwinnable. That they're only, for over a year now, there's been only so much as maybe 50 Al-Qaeda members in the entire country, Afghanistan, which was the ostensible reason for the invasion. But anyway, we're going to bring Ty up here in just a moment, but before we do so, I'm going to switch over to a few announcements here. If you want to get involved in the Gay Liberation Network, you can go to our website, which is www.gayliberation.net, and I'd also invite you to get involved in Iraq Veterans Against the War. Information you see coming up on your screen there, www.ivaw.org. Iraq Veterans Against the War is the support mechanism whereby soldiers who are against these wars, whether you served in Afghanistan, whether you served in Iraq, whether you still are in the military, you really should get involved in IVAW, and that's how you can get involved. Just go to www.ivaw.org. A few other announcements here. The 10th anniversary of the Afghanistan invasion is coming up, and we're having a protest march on the Obama 2012 headquarters beginning at 12 noon on Saturday, October 8th, starting at Michigan Avenue and Congress Parkway. You can just go to www.chicagomassaction.org to get all the information about that. And also, we've got a benefit concert coming up. David Rovix, who is a prominent anti-war voice, he is going to be doing a benefit concert against the forthcoming G8 and NATO summits here in Chicago, coming up 7 p.m. Saturday, October 29th, and that's going to be at St. Augustine College up in the Uptown neighborhood, and you can simply go to email ccawr@aol.com to get more information about that. But now I'm happy to have joining me Ty Zabel. Ty, you were in Afghanistan as recently as a month or so ago. Is that correct?
I actually was not deployed to
Oh,
Afghanistan.
okay.
I resisted an Afghanistan deployment.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, Ty. I've got my notes wrong there. Tell our audience why you decided to resist deployment to Afghanistan, and what was your reasoning? What was going through your mind when you decided not to? I mean, that's an enormous sacrifice because you potentially throw away your GI benefits and everything, right?
Mhm.
So tell our audience why you decided to take that very important step.
Well, it took a while to decide that I wanted to do that. There was a lot of factors moving to Chicago, from a very small town, and seeing something outside of the mainstream media, something outside of mainstream consciousness allowed me to, just open up my own mind and move into the peace movement,
Mm-hmm.
contact Iraq Veterans Against the War, and just
Mm-hmm.
start going through the process of conscientious objection.
Okay, and how did you first get in touch with you said that you read certain things. What were the sort of things, what were the sources of your information that made you, because you apparently would have entered the military with probably a very different set of ideas,
Mhm.
but what caused you to change your mind? What was these publications and so forth?
Well, there was a person who actually I knew that had been born in El Salvador during the occupation or revolution that was going on there at the time. And once I met her, she started telling me a little bit about what was going on or what had gone on when she was a child there. And I started looking more and more into U.S. foreign policy, not just in the present time, but throughout history, and understanding how we've led so many unjust occupations, so many unjust invasions of other places.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to be that guy kicking in somebody's door and scarring a little girl's mind for the rest of her life,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what had happened to this person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that you're being able to see through the eyes of the people who are victims of American foreign policy and the American military. I think that shows a lot of character on your part, Ty. That I was distributing some anti-war literature the other day, and some bozo came up to me and said, "Oh, carpet bomb them all." It's like, hello. How would you feel about someone carpet bombing the United States? Well, is it any wonder that peoples around the world see? I mean, poll after poll has shown that the vast majority of the world's population see the United States as the greatest threat to world peace.
Mhm.
And so you were stationed where when you decided to you filed for conscientious objection status?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Where were you stationed, Ty?
I was actually stationed in Kankakee because Army National Guard is stationed in the United States.
Okay.
So I was stationed in Kankakee, and I would go 1 weekend a month to drill. And I went to basic training and felt like there was something wrong. But as I continued, moving through and working with my unit, things they didn't seem right
Mm-hmm,
the entire
mm-hmm.
time.
What didn't seem right to you?
Well, I mean, if we go back to basic training, they told us, countless times we would be holding, this gun with, a blade on the end or whatever, and they'd be telling us to scream, kill, 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 and
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I signed up for. I signed up to protect people. I signed up to help people. I didn't
Mhm.
sign up to kill people.
Yeah, and a
you
lot of
know?
people join the National Guard thinking they're going to be helping flood victims,
Mhm.
and yet due to the stop loss and other measures to basically dragoon people into the military, you're instead doing this kill, kill, kill thing. That had to be quite a shock.
It was very shocking, especially because I was a bit naive and had this image in my mind of a very just sort of fighting force. This very honorable group of people who is ready to give their lives to something. And I still think that idea is there amongst most of the people that are in the military.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are responsible for sending them, the people sitting behind a desk with a pen,
Yeah.
like those are the people that are really spineless, I think.
Well, Ty, by filing for conscientious objection status, I mean, people can do that by getting information about that by going to the IVAW website. Is that correct?
Yes, and also the GI resistance hotline. If you just Google GI resistance, GI rights hotline, there's really a lot of resources out there to help soldiers put together the information that they need and all the stuff that they need to do to resist.
So if you are in the military yourself, or have a loved one, a friend who is in the military, and they're having second thoughts about the wars, as probably most soldiers are, at least according to the polls of the military itself, then you should really get in touch with IVAW. Let your friend, your relative know that IVAW exists as a resource if they don't want to be basically fodder for promoting American empire. Ty and others like him have shown that you can fight back, and frankly, we have discussed on this program people like Bradley Manning, who has very courageously, if the charges against him are true, has very courageously done the right thing and blown the whistle on U.S. war crimes. I think it says a great deal about your character and David's character, who was on here just a few minutes ago, that you decided not to just follow orders, that you decided to speak up against what you thought was wrong, even though you were probably paying a considerable price for it. This presumably messes with your GI benefits and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have no GI benefits. Yeah, so I'm totally fine with that, though.
Yeah, I just find it ironic. We've got a situation where people like Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and now President Obama, who I think, frankly, are war criminals, and nothing's happening to them. They're able to go on book tours and so forth, and yet gentlemen like you, who did what your conscience told you to do and paid a pretty heavy material price for it in terms of losing your benefits, that just strikes me as so unfair. Well, we've got just a little bit of time left in our program here. I want to close out with a few announcements here. Once I get the screen up here. Again, if you want to get involved with Iraq Veterans Against the War, go to IVAW.org and they'll get you all hooked up there. Again, that's www.ivaw.org. If you know a soldier, if you know a sailor, please send them in the direction of IVAW, because you may be saving their lives. You certainly perhaps maybe helping save their sanity as well. Coming up October 8th, Saturday, October 8th, 10th anniversary of America's longest war, protest march on the Obama 2012 National Campaign Headquarters here in Chicago, beginning 12 noon at Michigan Avenue and Congress Parkway. And we have the David Rovics benefit coming up. That is coming up on Saturday, October 29th, 7 p.m. And that's going to be at St. Augustine College, 1345 West Argyle. And there's how you can get tickets. And just a few quick more announcements. Our next GLN meeting coming up Wednesday, October 5th. Our next show is going to be Friday, October 14th. And then we've got our credits here for thanks for all the people who helped out tonight.